we're going to take a little break, and what I find absolutely fascinating about this is I didn't say much to Pastor Chris, and so he continued on in the venue of Job, and you hit on the very thing we're talking about today is servant leadership. Servant leadership. It all comes down to that. Where we're going with this is I'm going to give a message today that I think everyone needs to hear at least once in their life. And at least a variation, maybe not necessarily my particular message, but a message of this kind at least once in their life. And it's preparation, if you will, for Tuesday. For those who are voting members here, hang on to the sheets you were given. You're going to want those. And I'm going to start from a weird place. Do you have any smells that have stuck with you? I don't mean you smelling, I mean a scent that you smell. For instance, I can think of a couple for me. One is, have you ever had your car overheat? You ever had a really bad experience with that? I can tell you what, I can smell that hot radiator in a heartbeat now. Just a few molecules in the air and I go, uh-oh, something's overheating. Another one you might know is this is the heartland of propane. Everybody likes to use gas. So you've probably smelt some faulty device at some time or another, and you know the smell of a gas leak. And man, you can pick up that scent once you know it. There's another one for me that I wish I didn't know, but is the smell of mice. We live in Heritage Lake, most of us, and by golly, I'll tell you what, either alive or dead, you get where you can smell a mouse like you wouldn't believe. You know, just uh-oh, there's something going on here. How about this, though? Here's the question. Can you smell a lion? If there was a lion prowling around, and maybe in the summer, and you're outside and no sound, but you just go, uh-oh, that smells like a lion. Can you do that? Probably some of you can. Okay. Maybe Steve and I might be able to pull that off, right? Yeah, it's been a while. But we're going to talk about that. And you know what? What if I told you that to survive as a church, to survive spiritually, this is a smell you must learn? Why do you say that? Well, because God says so. 1 Peter 5:8, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion. He walks about like a roaring lion. Why? Seeking whom he may devour. Now, often when we read that text, we think in personal terms, individually. But you know what? Satan has a big appetite. He devours whole churches. And I'm unfortunate to say, but does it with pretty good regularity as well. It's important to be able to know that scent. If you're going to be in a position of leadership of any kind, or look to people who are supposed to be the leaders, the protectors, the shepherds in your church, they better know this smell. They better know when the scent is in the air. Well, how can we learn? Let me just offer a few basic lessons in this. Here's lesson one, I believe. Satan attacks at the threshold of the great works God is about to do. Satan attacks when there is a great work about to be done. Personal lesson for me goes way back, way back. I was involved in a church culture at the time, quite young, And man, this church was doing well. It was a church culture. We were reaching college students. We were reaching little people. We were reaching old people. We were reaching all kinds of folks. As a matter of fact, we had hit a new level where we actually had a tavern that was going to let us go in there once a week. I think it was going to be like on one of their off days, and have some type of Bible study or worship in there. I thought, man, talk about storming the gates of hell. No, we weren't going to serve beer during the worship. We were just going to go in there and give the message where it needed to be given. I said, man, it was going places. But there were some of us, a lot of us actually, that were, young in the faith. Man, we made some serious mistakes. Some really bad mistakes. I'm talking about the blow-up type of mistakes. The ones that leave a crater where there used to be a building type of mistakes. And for a number of us, it took us, I would say, 10 years to dig out of the carnage of what happened. 10 years for some of us, even in our personal life. Now you think about that. You can't afford to make those kind of mistakes too often. We don't live long enough. Satan, the roaring lion, was prowling around, and we just didn't recognize the smell. Lesson 1, Satan attacks at the threshold of great things. He attacks at the threshold of great things. And now here's the disturbing part. And this should worry all of us to some degree, or at least concern us. Satan doesn't need powerful Hollywood-type tools. You know what? All Satan needs is us. He just needs us. That's what he uses. He uses us against ourselves, our fallenness. If you are bent towards being indifferent, all he'll do is nudge you up a level in your indifference. If you're a fearful person, he'll find a way to stoke your fear. If you are a prideful person, he'll find a way to stroke your pride. If you're a tired person, he'll find a way to drain you just a little bit more. If you're an angry person, he'll find a way to fire up your emotion. All he needs is us. Anyone can be that weapon. Anyone can be that bomb in a church fellowship if we are not vigilant. If you don't know the scent of the roaring lion, it can happen quite quickly. Well, since that time, that was a long time ago, I've witnessed a number of churches actually on a couple of continents that have imploded and exploded for different reasons, and it's always been the lion has been at work. And I'm grateful to say I didn't play any part in it, but they were always painful reminders of the first time I smelt that scent, when I saw what the roaring lion could do in a church fellowship. Well, how about here? Could there be any scent in the air even here? Well, to be perfectly honest, around here every now and then we've got a friend, Poopy Le Pew. You smell him come by, the Pepe Le Pew, that was it, so smell Poopy Le Pew. Every now and then we had a problem with a skunk. And you'd go out there and you go, oh, and I know the trustees felt this way, oh man, I hope he's not under the building again. Talk about this place really stunk for a while. But you can catch that smell waft over the fields every now and then. Oh, I'm just starting to get it. He's not here yet, but he's maybe on his way. The lion can be the same way. And yeah, I think I have caught that scent around our church in this time. because the conditions are right. We have the potential right now of some amazing works to be done. And yet on the other side, man, it could evaporate very, very quickly. Let me pull the great big old white elephant into the room. We know we lost a very valuable member lately. Our board chair stepped away abruptly, and in the big picture of things, maybe that's exactly what had to happen. I believe I'm not too worried about it in the way it was a devastating thing for me personally, but I'm not too worried about it because God's under control and everything happens for a godly reason. God is under control. But the truth is, let me just tell you that he was one of the few people, say, who was involved in the protege our cohort, the mentoring of raising up leaders. He was one of the few people who was in it from the ground up. He understood the whys and the whats of it in the ministry, and he was the partner in that. He was involved in a tremendous amount of innovative work that we did around here. We partner with the CNMA and the resources in all kinds of ways. We have concepts we've learned from him that, I'll be honest, there's probably only about 2 of us in this building who know, because he put in the time and the effort, and it takes time to learn some of these things. And so it feels like a real setback, but maybe not. Maybe it's what had to be at this point. I'm just saying, I smell the lion in the air with that. Well, how about the flip side? How about the positive stuff? I want to take you on a little personal journey in here on something that has been going on. It really goes back 7 years. You know, Pastor Chris being here is really a 7-year journey. We started with the idea, every denomination around 10 years ago really started picking up. Every denomination was becoming very concerned about the failure rate of ministers, of pastors. There was moral failure rate, there was burnout, there was all kinds of things that were going on. So they wanted every denomination to start some type of mentorship program where it was going to be not just the theological training, but the training of in the field, if you will, of raising up people. So we got involved with that. We've dealt with the district, and man, Bob Petty can explain something to you in a way that, man, you'll get on fire with the idea. And so they had their own program that they were bringing up. Paul sitting here, Greenhouse, I think, was in Eagle as well. I think they did some greenhouse work program. The deal breaker for us, why we didn't go completely with the CMA program, was if somebody was a good fit, we wanted to hang on to them. We wanted that option. So lo and behold, we had this chance. There was another major program at the time that was actually a little bit pricey to get trained in. As a matter of fact, it could cost $1,000 or more to get trained in how they did things. Through the Wesleyan Church, we got to do it for free. Once again, the chairman, Rick, and I went and were trained in that way. So we combined all these programs together and started this, and lo and behold, as we looked around, we found the exact person that needed to be here. And we found them through our CNMA resources. Chris came to us through Crown College, and so he was already understood the system of things. But the idea in the programs kind of went something like this. I'm off the top of my head here, but the first 6 months, come in, just watch. Just see how crazy these people are. Decide if you really want to get involved. Then the next 6 months, we're joining the programs and start learning how we've got to where we are so far. Third 6 months, we're kind of more of, okay, innovate, start seeing what you can do with programs. And then from there on, it was like, innovate, because we all know that the way church has been done in the past 10, 20 years is not going to take you into the next 10 or 20 years. The culture's changing too fast. So we needed a lot of innovation to start going on. And Chris and Kelly started doing all of these things at the highest level. They have programs they've been involved in, the robotics, of course, being a big one, how that gets used somewhere where they've, the ripple effect has been so much in some of the programs that even the district looks at what they're doing and in the homeschooling and all of this. So some of the innovation that started from our program in here is the epicenter to stuff that's going district-wide, which could, could go nationwide in some of these things. Just a point that here is the potential. Now, here's the thing with all of this. It took over 2 years just to bring someone up to a launching pad, to build a launching pad to do amazing things from. The amazing things really haven't even, as much as some great stuff has happened, haven't even started yet. Hasn't even started yet. It takes time. The potential's there. But all it would take on something like this would be a few short-sighted decisions, a few decisions made that were just slightly off step from the new work that God is trying to do. And it would evaporate like manna in the desert. Like those 7 years never happened. We had a second thing, and keep in mind, I'm highlighting some folks, and that's always dangerous for a couple of reasons. One is it's like, well, what about the rest of us who have been doing things? No, I'm bringing these people up for a point because it deals with potential and new work. The second one is this. Just before COVID hit, we were working on more of an online infrastructure, not to replace what happens in the church building, but in order to reach out a little bit more. Man, we were just starting, and the first lockdown was bang. It was like in the first week. It's like, what's going on? So we then just accelerated what we were doing, got a number of things going, got to the point of where we understood because, well, we already had two nerds, right? We had Chris and we had me, and man, we were into it. But we needed more nerd power, to keep it going. Clint's going to hate me for this, but that's where Clint comes in. Clint was an expert on all things computer, the online work. He had lots of experience, expert with video cameras, all of this stuff, and God just happens to bring him along to us exactly when we were trying to pull this thing off. Now, in this whole infrastructure of things, like we say, we learned some things through COVID. One thing is, no matter how good we'd ever get online, it will never, ever replace human connection. Boy, there was a big lesson we learned, is we must have this. This can never go away. But we also learned that all this electronic stuff is a powerful tool to reach where other tools can't. And then you get people, hopefully in the long run, where they'll come in for the more the deeper tools that go into action. But here's what happened to us so far. Our record and the number of people we've put out a message of truth to and they've listened to has been 9,000 views. Well, 9,000 I know on the internet's not like big potatoes, but when's the last time we had a meeting in here with 9,000 people? Sundays, if regularly, especially if we get caught and shut down, there are always somewhere between 100 and 500 people that are tuning in on this. We've even have them well over 600 in some cases. And Pastor Chris and Elder Steve, whose birthday was yesterday, the man, the legend, I don't know if you saw the post. Yeah. They have been doing a men's study, and the motto used to be what's said in the men's club stays in the men's club. We kind of blew that out of the water now because it goes online. And we would host 3, 4, 5 people there in person, and we still do. Greg and James are there like faithfully all the time. However, online, they're reaching 50 plus people on a regular basis during their live stream. Well, that's not the optimum. We want them in the building, but you know what? That's 50 people we might not be reaching otherwise. In the same way, we've reached into strange countries. I don't know if you know where Kurdistan is. At one time when we were reaching out, the top country was Iran that we were reaching into. Next to America, of course. We far reach in here. So there's a lot of stuff that we're going on. And when you bring in people who know what they're doing, Clint's also helping us with some. He's saved us 2 or 3 times already, where our old computers had broken down, and he did some magic to bring them back. There's all kinds of equipment that we need, and others we don't, and a price we should pay and a price we shouldn't. And he's an expert in all those things, can help us out in some amazing ways. You've got all these people willing to do this innovative work here that has the potential of doing a whole lot more, but it's the potential. The other side of it is a few wrong decisions and it all goes away. That's maybe not all that different for churches, except for this. Those are the conditions in which the roaring lion starts prowling. He does not like churches on the threshold of anything of significance. You have to be able to catch the scent of the roaring lion, or you become lion food. That brings me really to lesson number 2, and it says how you know is because be vigilant. Be vigilant. And it's not just as individuals, it's vigilant as a collective of people as well. Be vigilant, and in that vigilance, let me give you a very, very simple principle for church government. No matter what type of church governance you're talking about, the church will be the nature of the leadership. You may sit there and say, well, I'll make all the best influence I can, but I tell you, from 40 plus years of experience, the church will be the nature of its leadership. So you better watch the leadership. If the church officers, all of them, no matter what the office, if the church officers are biblically solid leaders, then the church will be biblically solid. If the church leaders are sensitive to that call, to that where God is going and leading, then the church will be God-centered. If the leaders recognize the scent of the lion, then you'll have a safe church. If the church leaders are focused on the peripherals, it's 90% about the money or who's controlling what, your church is lion food. If your leaders have very little scriptural wisdom, your church is lion food. It may work as a business or something, but it will be of no spiritual value. We need as many spiritually solid leaders as we can get. But what about negative influence? Now, keep in mind in all of this, I am not speaking of any, I am talking in principles. You can take what I'm saying. I'm putting the Canaan human face on it, but you can take what I am saying to you in principle, and I hope you apply it wherever you are, wherever you go, with whatever people you are dealing with or voting for, whatever it is in a church governance. The negative side is actually kind of fascinating. How much negative can a good church, biblical church, endure? And I found some interesting stuff dealing with a negative element in the church. And I'll start with this one. It goes way back to about 50 AD. The Galatian church was going off the rails. They were making some bad decisions and making some bad theology go on there. And Paul writes to them, the Apostle Paul, and he says this, you ran well. They were a good church. Who hindered you from obeying the truth? This persuasion does not come from him who calls you. Here's the line. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. A little leaven leavens the whole lump. I have confidence in you and in the Lord that you will have no other mind, but he who troubles you, speaking down to a single individual here, he who troubles you shall bear his judgment, whoever he is. Maybe an isolated situation. Well, here's what he writes to the church in Corinth, who is, guess what, going off the rails. 1 Corinthians 5, 6, 7. Your glorying is not good. Do you not know that, catch this, a little leaven leavens the whole lump? Therefore, purge out the old leaven, that you may be a new lump, since you truly are unleavened. This is the fascinating thing about this metaphor Paul uses. This idea of a little bit affects the entire thing. It's never used in a positive way. It's always used in a negative way. Is that a little bad leaven ends up spoiling the whole thing. It impacts the entire thing. A little bit of bad leadership can impact the entire leadership. It's the way it works. Possible example, and this is because I've seen this in more than one church. We've got a meeting on Tuesday coming up, okay? And the idea is going to be discussion and voting and all the usual hoopla that you do at congregational meetings. I would challenge you, if you're going to be here, watch this. Watch this. If there is just one angry comment, or there is just one divisive remark, and watch how the atmosphere of that meeting will change like that. Change a little leaven in the whole lump. Now keep this in mind. I want to be sure I'm clear here. I'm not talking about people questioning something or offering an alternate opinion on something or even challenging a thought. You know what I mean. It'll be a comment, or in a spirit, it'll be a tone that is not of God. And the spirit changes just like that. It'll change just like that. That dynamic can happen anywhere in any church. Now take that same dynamic and put it into board meetings, and you have that happen time after time. What do you think happens in the dynamic of that leadership? A little leaven impacts the whole lump. Wherever you go, whatever church, remember, this is not me, this is God's principle on this. So what can a church do when you catch that scent of the lion in the air? I mean, how does a church shield itself? Well, it brings me to a point of preparation, if you will, and the second one, dealing with the voting, at least in a congregational style church. So the voting in something like this, what's the prime criteria? It's the same for every person who is on the ballot. Doesn't matter what the office is, because they're all spiritual offices. It doesn't matter how many people you need. The principle is going to come down to this. There is a biblical standard to be followed, or it will not be a biblical church. There's a biblical standard, or it will not be a biblical church. Now, the Holy Spirit equips and gifts all of us. We're not all even gifted to leadership, but we're all gifted, those who are in a living relationship with Christ. We use them in different ways, but the standard is universal. Doesn't matter what you're doing, from custodian to pastor to whatever, it doesn't matter. So we had a meeting with all the future officers way back when we were getting ready for the vote before COVID really messed us all up. And each person who is going to be or was continuing as a church officer was given a sheet of biblical standard. And it was a very simple sheet. It had 7 leadership traits on the sheet. And you have them right now. They came with your bulletin. If you don't have them there, they're on the online bulletin. But 7 simple traits, not set by me, maybe trying to be condensed by me, but they are 7 traits that God has set as a standard. If you want a biblical leadership, which means if you want a biblical church. And in that, there were a number of things, but remembering the church will go the way of the leadership. How you select. The most important thing, I'll tell you, when you have a congregational meeting where the future of the church is being discussed, is not the budget. It is not the building. It is none of that stuff. It is who are you putting into positions to lead you? Who are you putting in to lead the church? And the selection comes down really to one thing. It's not, do we need this office filled? It's not, well, we just choose who we can in a small church. It is always down to, do they meet the standards that are on that sheet that you have? Do they meet those standards? And if they don't, then by default, you're putting in somebody who is a little leaven in the lump. Well, if I vote by this, it may be for you. You look in your heart and you say, yes, I feel these people actually match this. And you might click off everybody on that ballot. Or you may look at it and say, in my heart, I cannot say there's one person on here that meets this biblical standard. By golly, don't vote for any of them, including me. And you'll find that's the way the ballot will work for those voting. The idea, if it's a biblical standard, because you know what? You could start with a small biblical, solid leadership and then expand from there. But remember, a little leaven can spoil the whole lump. Voting is not something to be done casual. Put in wrong people and your church is lion food. It's lion food. In this whole overriding criteria here, I want to point out just a few quick, simple things. I know it sounds a little bit like preparation for Tuesday, and in fact it really is, but I'm just going to continue on because I think we need to know a few other little principles here. If we were to not select somebody, it's not an unkindness either. You know what's really unkind is to select someone who shouldn't be there. That's what's unkind. Consider these verses, if you will. James 3:1 and 2. My brethren, let not many of you become teachers, knowing that we shall receive a stricter judgment, for we all stumble in many ways. That's even why Pastor Chris was here in through the protege, the mentoring project, is because it's so easy to stumble. But the one to really catch is 1 Timothy 3:1 through 7. If a man desires the position of bishop, and we're going to come back to that word just in a second, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, and it goes on a number of things. But here's where we're going with the punchline of this. Not a novice. And keep in mind, a novice isn't just somebody who's new to the faith. It's somebody who's just simply young in the faith. You know, I've said this before. We have people within the church community who have lived one year of development 40 times instead of 40 years of development. So keep that in mind. But anyways, it reads on like this. If a man desires the position of bishop, he desires a good work. A bishop then must be blameless, not a novice, lest being puffed up by pride, he fall into the same condemnation as the devil. Moreover, he must have a good testimony among those who are outside, lest he fall into reproach and the snare of the devil. The word bishop in that Greek actually translates a person of ideal work. A person of ideal work. That fits everything in ministry. Ideal meaning precious, genuine, approved, designated by their office, noble or honorable. In other words, it could be anyone. Anyone that is working within the running of the church. If that person is ill-equipped for where you are placing them, you have just placed them in harm's way. People get destroyed by being put into a position they are not prepared biblically, spiritually to handle. There's nothing kind about that. So we keep that in mind. In church leadership, it is good to vote with the heart. It's good to vote with the mind, but by golly, we better be voting from the Bible. We better be choosing from that standard, or the lion is prowling. And I just want to throw a quick aside out too for people who are, the churches are filled with regular attenders who aren't members. Good people, spiritual people, just not members really. And a lot of time we run into, and I'm saying this as you're still voting, but you're just voting with your silence. Over the past decade, it's something that's been growing over the past 10 years in particular. A number of times I've been brought, why should I be a member of any church anyway? It's just Jesus, isn't it? Why should I be a member of a church? Why should I make a pledge? And that always kind of caught me. I said, that's a good question. Why should you make a pledge? And then it dawned on me, there's no such thing biblically. Here's a new one. There's no such thing as a membership pledge. How so? Well, because it works like this. See, you do make a pledge. You say, don't let your yes be yes and your no be no. Well, let me tell you, for anybody who is alive in Christ, you have made a whopper of a pledge in accepting Christ as Lord. Because when we do that, you have pledged yourself to every standard and practice in the New Testament. That's how we stay alive. So you know what happens when you go somewhere? Like if you look at our covenant with our members, it's probably like a lot of other churches, probably not much different. All it is a bunch of biblical reminders. So when you go anywhere, you're not making a pledge. The pledge is already made. All you are doing is acknowledging that God has put you in this place at this time to physically carry out your pledge. And if He didn't put you there, if you don't have that sense, find some place, by heaven's sake, find some place where you feel God has sent you, and then acknowledge it by coming into a formal, official acknowledgement of, yes, I will not carry out my pledge to this church, to Christ Himself. It's just that this is the place I'm going to be doing it. That's what it is. Now, in all of this, I realize it's kind of dry stuff in a way, but everybody should realize how a church, no matter what style or flavor it is, should work, and what your part in is, and how you can be wrong in what you're doing and how you can be right. How when you come into a place, you can tell if you're talking about the scent of the lion is prowling about, or they're doing pretty well with it. The whole idea for those who are voting members now, not to tell you what to vote. Check everyone off or check no one off. That's between you and God. But I am telling you how to vote. If you come in here and it's just almost incidental, yeah, you have done no favors to your church. As a matter of fact, I would be willing to say you've just opened the door to the lion. At least spend some time reflecting, whether it's something on there from me or Chris or a trustee or a deacon or an elder. You go down and you decide if that person is up to the standard and go from there. Everything else we can work out. But we can't if we let the lion through the door. Is there people you should be watching out for other than me? That's a bad sign. I said that, nobody laughed, Steve, so I guess it might be a better... Thanks, Brendan. No, I'm not talking about anyone in particular, because I think part of the system is you may be right about someone, I may be wrong, I might be right, you might be wrong. Collectively, hopefully, as a church, we understand enough together that who's in there is by the grace of God. So that's it. But I'm just saying, make sure, however, whether it's here, whether it's Tuesday, whether it's 10 years from now, when you come into a position where you have a voice into the leadership of a church body, vote by this standard. It is either a little leaven in the lump or something that is pure according to God's word.